If you've ever thought to yourself, I'd rather just read about this than actually do it, you're not alone. The Enneagram 5 newsletter exists to help you move from knowing to experiencing. Every Saturday, you'll get insights designed to help fives grow without overwhelm. Sign up for free today at enneagram5.com/newsletter or visit the link in the description. Now on to the show.
So Josiah,
Yes, Cody.
how do you feel about authority?
Viva la revolution.
My name is, and I'm an Enneagram 5.
My name is, and I'm an Enneagram 5.
That was a really good question because that definitely plays in big time into my educational experience.
Oh, I know every 5, I think.
Oh, man.
Always challenge authority.
Oh, I hated school.
Yeah.
I hated it so much. It felt like such a waste of time.
Yeah, I only went to school till 4th grade, so.
Wait, what do you mean you only went to school till 4th grade?
Well, I homeschooled after that.
Oh, I thought you were homeschooled the whole time. Okay, so you
No.
went. Okay, so we kind of did the opposite things.
Yeah.
Where I was homeschooled until 7th grade, and then I went to public school, and so you were homeschooled until 4th grade. Oh, no, you went to public school until 4th grade.
Yeah.
And then you were homeschooled. That's
Yeah.
how it went.
Yeah, exactly. All the way through my senior year.
Okay, so let's talk about your experience first.
All right. Yeah, so I only went to one school ever, an elementary school, from kindergarten to 4th grade. And it was a really small school and very old. I remember that all of the floors were very uneven. It was easy to trip, all the wooden floors. Like literally it was like warped wooden floors. It was kind of crazy.
Where the hell did you go to school?
It was near my house, near my parents' house. But yeah, no, it was a really interesting experience for me because there was so many teachers that were just really mean and old, and they were just not nice to kids. And I remember thinking, even as a kid, like, why are you a teacher? Why are you here? Well, you're surrounded by people you hate. And they were just really mean. And yeah, I didn't respond really well to that, I guess, because I mean, at that young of an age, I just clammed up, I just didn't do anything. But the whole reason that I homeschooled was because I think I've told this story before.
Oh, yeah, because your mom
was
volunteering at the school.
Yeah, I don't know if she was volunteering, but she was the nurse, and she pinned the the teacher up against the wall, told her she wasn't allowed to tell her whether she could or couldn't talk to her son, which is rightfully so. That would probably make me mad too. And then like a week later, I was pulled out of school forever. And then I just started. My parents pretty much immediately got I did like classes out of books for a little while until it was very apparent that was not going to work out for me very well. And so we switched to computer programs. That way there was like video and something that would keep my attention for, a little bit longer. But
okay, so let's back up though. When you were in school, even though it was just till 4th grade, did you enjoy school?
Generally, I had friends. I was mostly, I had an active imagination when I was a kid. So, I mean, obviously all I cared about was going outside and doing recess. Like that's what I really wanted was recess. It was either recess or lunch or PE. I loved PE actually. I was really active, I guess, as a kid and loved to play. And so I had my small set of friends, and we would play. I just remember there was a part of the playground that was like mostly pine trees, and so we'd just play in the woods and be like superheroes or fighting or whatever. That's actually the most of what I remember from school. I guess that's what really stuck with me and what I cared about the most. And there was a couple other things. I remember one time they brought a snake to school. There was for us to pet. It was one of those really big ones, I don't know what it's called.
Python?
Python, yeah, probably a python. And And I remember I used to love like book fairs. Those
Yes.
were big for me. I loved like being able to go and find new books and beg my mom for money so that I could buy all these things and like buy like stupid things like pens and erasers and weird things. You know, do you remember the pen that you could push different colors down on either side?
Yes.
I always wanted one of those, and I finally got one. I was so happy, but I envied my other friends who had them forever. And I always got like those like erasers you could stick on the top of the pencil. That was like special, different kind of erasers.
Yeah, I had those too. I
Yeah.
remember I brought one of those pens home from a workshop that I did when I was out of town. I brought it home to my 5-year-old, who I think was like 3 or something at the time. And he still has that pen, and it's like it's taped up because it's been broken, and it's like one of the biggest treasures that he has. It's this pen, and he thought it was something where I just randomly put it in my bag because they had handed it out.
Yeah.
And for us to do this, these writing exercises, and I just put it in my bag and brought it home, didn't think about it, and gave it to him because, I thought he'd think it was fun for like a day. But no, he loves that thing. It's so funny.
Well, and there's actually kind of a theme there too, because you a lot of times in class, I remember there was I think it was first grade. Whenever you did something that was like gold star worthy, then she had this bucket or like container of little meaningless toys. But God, I wanted to get into that bucket of toys. Like I always was just like, that was my goal. And so whatever I could do in class to get into the toys. And also I really liked getting gold stars on my sheet too. So I was just very reward oriented. I was very all about the reward based. I still do that for myself in my own head. Like, well, if I get all of these things done, then I get a treat. I'm basically a dog. I'm just training myself.
That's funny.
Yeah, I don't remember much about that. My experience with school was mostly probably once I was homeschooled, I was friends with all of the kids at the local schools all around. So in middle school and high school, I still went to dances and football games and proms and all that, but I never did any of the homeschool stuff. I just did public school stuff. So all of my friends were in public school. I didn't actually know anybody homeschooled when I did. So a lot of people, as soon as they hear the word homeschool, they assume that I was probably in a bubble or
One of
something.
those weird homeschoolers.
Yeah. Did co-ops, the homeschool co-ops or homeschool prom. I remember that was a thing, and I was just like, that sounds so lame. I would never go to that. But I don't know. I don't really have a really bad taste in my mouth about school because I didn't really have. It was kind of tailored to me, so it wasn't really that hard for me.
Okay. Yeah, we have very different experiences. And
Yeah.
then, when you were younger, when it was less about the schoolwork and more about the interaction and like learning how to be a human, and so that
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then when you got into homeschooling, it sounds like did you enjoy what you were doing? How did that go for you?
I think I did. It was. I remember it was a Christian-based curriculum, and I just kind of went through it, and I could do it at my own pace, which is crazy because if I was smart, I would have done a lot more than I did and finished early. But I didn't. What I saw was I could do 8 hours of schoolwork in 4 hours and have the rest of the day. What I should have done was 8 hours of schoolwork and done 2 days worth of school. Because if you think about it, a lot of the schooling that you go to in public school, if you condensed it all,
Right.
it's only 4 hours. And so, but you spend so much time going from class to class and lunch and all these other things. Like,
Yeah, and all the context switching, it takes it takes its toll. Like you're not really focused until 10, 15 minutes into the class, and then depending on how it's set up, you start to lose attention towards the end, and so.
yeah, I think in my high school years, I think that I figured out that I could do like all of my subjects. I could do like a math day and an English day, and like I could do a whole week's worth of work in one day, and I didn't have to switch my mind like that. So yeah, it really wasn't that bad. The worst part about it was probably just having to be at home, and like eventually isolation will get to you. It doesn't matter if I'm a 5 or not. I wanted to go spend time with my friends and do
Yep.
things, and it was always kind of this back and forth situation with me and my parents and whether or not I was allowed to go hang out. And but for me, it wasn't like I just want to go hang out after school. It was I need to hang out with somebody else because I haven't seen anybody else in 2.5 days. Like, I just need to go do something. And so I think that probably influenced a lot of why I love to be home now. Like, I love just being at home, because back then I was kind of forced into that, and kind of a forced isolation a little bit. And just because, and that's just how it went. And yeah, kind of influenced the way I am now.
Growing up, I have always loved school. From the very beginning, from being 5 years old in kindergarten, they had me go read to the 6 and 7-year-old classes, and I loved it. And even all throughout college, I had to rein it in and say only 2 degrees right now and come back. And I love learning for the sake of learning, even when the recognition pulled back. Even when I wasn't the top of my class, I still loved learning, even outside of school. I would take it home and I would study it extra. I was always learning a language. That was always my thing as a kid. And it made me feel comfortable. It made me feel secure to learn a language like Spanish. And I started learning American Sign Language, and then Japanese at another point. And that was really tough in my life, and Chinese. And I just love learning. And I think that really is the fivest thing about me.
I didn't love certain aspects of school growing up, because even though I loved learning and loved doing things, I didn't really always get how to do it in such a structured environment. I wanted my mind to wander freely, so I'd often struggle to pay attention. So even though I was engaged in learning and doing things, I didn't like the kind of seemingly arbitrary focus of trying to do everything on this certain schedule. And so I found myself doodling a lot and not paying attention. And it wasn't so much that I couldn't learn the stuff, but just that I kind of had a hard time funneling my energy into that environment.
So when you were going at your own pace, did you, like, I guess what motivated you when you were going through your schoolwork?
That's a good question. It motivated me that one day I would be done. Because school for me was hard, because a lot of it wasn't stuff that I wanted to learn. Now, if I was doing it now, I would probably feel differently, because I love a lot of things, and I would be interested in things like history or English or science. Like, I would want to stretch myself and do those things. But back then, there was like certain things. I was really good at English. I was really good at writing, and I was terrible at math, like so bad at math. And the only thing that I actually ever like passed easily was geometry. Everything else I was just really bad at, like tears, throwing things, like being very angry, bad at it. And my mom isn't particularly good at math, and my dad is good at math, but he doesn't speak my language at all. Him and my brother could talk math all day, but not me. And so they would just make me angrier. So I had no real like help in that department. And of course, years later, it kind of it made more sense that I couldn't count in my head. And we've talked about this. I can't remember what it's called.
Dyscalculia?
Dyscalculia?
Dyscalculia? Yeah, I think so.
Okay. We'll get corrected by somebody. Always. Yeah. And having that was a huge part of, like, I can't work out problems in my head and trying to figure it out on paper. And it's sometimes, if it doesn't make sense on paper, then I'm screwed. So that was probably the most frustrating thing. That, and just the social aspect of it, because it was less social, and at that time I wanted to be more social. I didn't, or at least I thought I did. Anytime that I went to events, I usually wanted to go home before everybody else did. Like, if I go to a dance, I'm always like, are you guys ready to go yet? Like, I was like, at 2 hours in, I'm like hanging out against the wall, just kind of watching everybody and just being like, okay, I want to go home, I'm tired. But that's, I don't know, that, and probably what kept me around events was mostly just like sex driven. If there was a girl I liked there, then sure, I'll stick around. Yep. But other than that, it's probably just, I would rather go home and like play my guitar and keep to myself.
Yeah. You touched on something that I definitely want to dive into, which I think is a big theme for us, which is one of the things that you disdained was being forced to learn things that you're not interested in. And as fives, we're very curious in general. We're very curious, and so like we want to go after those curiosities.
Right.
And when you're telling us no, you have to focus on this, what you're really telling us is you can't go focus on the things that you're really curious about right now.
Exactly.
And that, it just, oh man, drives me crazy. But we really did have like complete opposite experiences, because I think because we did the homeschool versus public school thing at opposite phases of our life, we had different experiences in that regard. When I was homeschooled growing up, definitely the isolation piece, especially because we usually lived in small towns where there wasn't anyone around. There was no like system that I could get plugged into outside of, my basement where I always stayed and did my schoolwork.
Yeah.
I was very much, well, first of all, my parents were very hands-off in general, and I always loved to learn. And so I taught myself how to learn, essentially. Like my dad taught me math when I was 4 or 5. I think I was doing like long division and multiplication by the time I was 5, because he sat down with me and was like showing me how to do it, and I picked it up really quickly. And I was also reading by the time I was 5. So it was, I had that insatiable curiosity from the beginning. And the thing that drove me nuts when I was, the good part about being homeschooled was that I could go at my own pace. And I absolutely loved that, because I ended up, by the time I transitioned over to public school, I was 2 grades ahead in math and a grade ahead in everything else. And one of the things that drove me crazy about math was that I would learn the concept and then have to do it 50 times. I'm like, I'll do it once or twice and I get the concept. Like we have like very different brains in that regard, because I was very good at picking up math stuff and I got it right away. And then I wanted to move on to the next thing and learn the next thing.
Yeah.
But then instead of doing that, I had to go through and just do the same thing over and over, and like little variations and repetition. I'm like, I don't need this.
You were doing that for the students like me.
Yeah.
He was in the back going, I don't get this.
Right, exactly. But this is what I did at one point, and I think this was when my parents were finally like, okay, I think we need to send him to school. I somehow, because my sister's 5 years older than me, and we did the same school curriculum. And so by the time I got there, my mom had ordered a brand new like workbook and then the answer guide. But what she didn't realize was there was still an old answer guide that was the same for my workbook. And I found it. And so what I would do is I would go through and I would learn the concepts, do the first few, and then I would just use the answer guide to fill in the rest. And I went through the whole thing that way.
Yeah.
And I felt so guilty afterwards.
Really?
Oh yeah, I definitely did, because it was more of a I sinned against God type of a thing.
Oh, yeah.
And so I eventually came clean to my parents. But the problem was like my mom, she, both my parents worked full time, both my parents worked, especially when I was little, they worked full time, had their own businesses. And then, she had 5 kids that she was trying to homeschool. And so because I was naturally someone who was self-taught, they just kind of let me do my own thing, which was great in one regard. But I also had very little accountability and very little like guidance. And
yeah.
So I learned a lot, and I did my schoolwork. I remember I would wake up. It was great because I'd wake up. I'd probably get started around like 10 and then be done by like 1 or 2.
Same. Yeah.
And it was fantastic. Like I didn't have to, really slog through a whole school day. But I didn't know that. I only saw school from TV.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, they're having so much fun.
Yeah.
They don't have to sit here all day and like do the schoolwork. They're interacting. They're out doing stuff. They actually have like science labs and they get to, learn about stuff like that. And not just through books, but, in-person, hands-on type of thing.
Right.
And that was a lot of my motivation for wanting to go to school. And so I came in, and it did not take me very long until
You're like, what have I done?
I'm so over it. Oh
Yeah.
my God. So 7th grade is when I came in, and I was still very much like, I loved to learn and I loved feeling smart.
Yeah.
And so it was, from the get-go, I was like put in the accelerated learning program, and got to hang out with all the smart kids. And
Did you get picked on?
well, yeah, but not because of that.
I remember when I was in school, at least 'cause obviously it's younger, but I remember the smart kids were always picked on for being smart, like for being in that special class. They were basically treated like the people who were really smart and maybe the people who were more developmentally disabled. You had two either sides of the spectrum, but they both had their own special class. And I kind of feel like the students, I remember this very clearly, that the students were kind of treated the same, which is strange and terrible because nobody should be treated that way. But if you were just different in any way, if you weren't in the normal classes, if you got to go into any kind of special circumstance where you're in a different kind of class, then
Like Malcolm in the Middle. Did you ever watch that show?
I watched it in pieces. I don't know. I don't know the reference.
Yeah. It was very much, it played into that social subtype for a 5 of like feeling like I'm part of this elite group.
Sure.
And so
Yeah.
that if I did get made fun of for that, it didn't bother me because I kind of like wore it as a badge of honor. I got made fun of for how completely socially awkward I was, and
Yeah.
like really, really socially awkward. But I made good grades. I remember I came home with my first report card after being in public school, and I had 2 100s, 2 98s, and 2 95s.
Wow.
And I took it to my dad, and he looked at it and he said, "Well, you could have brought those 95s up."
Oh my God.
Because I think a lot of what played into my story was just growing up hearing like how smart my dad was, and which is another indicator that he might be a 5, and how he would have been valedictorian, except he like intentionally flunked a test so he could stay back and play football another year, and just like all this.
Oh.
I don't know if that's true, but that's a
Yeah.
story that like my
That
mom
sounds
tells me.
like a story. That does not sound like a truth.
I don't know what happened. A lot of stuff happened, I think, his senior year of high school that I'm not aware of.
Yeah, probably.
That's when my parents got married. So,
Oh.
yeah, I think, they got married when my dad was 17 and my mom was 19.
Okay.
So, unless it may have been like right after he graduated then.
How much older than you is your sister?
We'll have that conversation
We can
offline.
put that piece together. What they might be doing in their senior year.
We can have that conversation offline. But I had this drive up until that point because I wanted to get his approval.
Yeah.
As he's my dad. And I think that's when that started to crack. I also played football in middle school, if you can believe it or not.
Wow.
And it was because he played football.
Yeah,
And,
of course.
so I wanted to be like him.
You're just
And-
living in your dad's shadow. You were more like high school, or you were more like TV high school than you think you were.
Oh no, I know. Like that's because that's how I viewed everything. Because up until that point, all I knew was school through TV, and so I was whether it was consciously or unconsciously, I was trying to play out all of these TV tropes.
But that's something I don't think you can really plan. Like living in your dad's shadow through high school, like that is an actual trope of TV high school, like drama. It's always that kid who like pushes himself too hard until he has a nervous breakdown because he's trying to please his dad. Like you were that character.
Well, it didn't last long.
Yeah, that's good.
Because I started to realize that, or at least the story I was telling myself was like, it doesn't matter how much effort I put in, or how well I do, I'm never going to get his approval. So what's the fucking point? Like,
Yeah.
Why even try? And-
Also a trope of hype. Sorry, go on. That's usually how it ends, actually.
But that really played in. I think that was a lot of the seeds of what blossomed into my later career or educational career.
Sure.
And professional career, probably.
Yeah.
But I do remember I think I told the story where I moved in the middle of my 8th grade year from a small town in West Georgia to Marietta, which was upper middle class at the time, at least. And it was, I fit in there even less. But before I moved, I had gotten to the point where I actually was still really trying. And I remember in math class especially was my favorite because there were a few of us that were really good at math, and we started competing like on who could get the highest score, but then that kind of got boring, and so it was like who could get the highest score, but then also who could get done first. And then that kind of started to get boring. And so then this teacher had these 3D foam puzzles. And anytime you finished early, you could pick one up and just put it together and play with it. So not only did you have to get like the highest score, you had to, you had to get the highest score and put together as many puzzles as possible, like more puzzles than the other people too.
Oh.
Like that. And I love that.
Yeah.
Because it was just, it engaged my brain so much, and it was all these problem solving, things. And I thrived on that. But then when I moved, there was the way that the alignment of the particular types of maths lined up. I ended up having to take 7th grade math in 8th grade, because the 7th grade math at my new school was the same as the 8th grade math at my old school.
Oh.
So I had to walk out of the 8th grade hall and down into the 7th grade hall.
Oh, no.
And they were completely different schedules too, because the new school was on block schedule, and then the old school was on periods. And so they were, not only was it a different, like they were ahead because they did more in a shorter period of time because they had longer blocks. And so then I'm like trying to figure out what's going on. And I went from feeling really, really competent to not only am I incompetent in a math class, I'm incompetent in a math class with a bunch of 7th graders.
Yeah, man.
And that was the time, when I talked about on the previous episode where I went through that traumatic experience.
Yeah.
And like went into deep depression, and so that was when I was just like, fuck it, I don't care about any of this stuff anymore. And one of the things that had frustrated me, prior to that was, like we talked about, I enjoy going at my own pace, and it just always drove me crazy that I had to wait on other people. Like I would get there, and it wasn't with all subjects, but especially with like math and some other things. Like I would get there and I'm like, okay, let's move on. But then we couldn't. And then I would just start to get bored.
Yeah.
And so then when we got to this place where I'm just like, fuck it, this isn't worth the effort. Then I started to get really bored and really destructive. And and that set the frame for the rest of my whole school experience, because I very much became the epitome of an underachiever. And
your whole high school years, you were a 7.
I don't know what I was, but
disintegrated.
I was a huge pain in the ass to so many of my teachers. I have so many stories, dude. Like, I could probably tell stories about this all night, but there are a few I think would be fun.
I'm glad, because I don't have any stories. Like most of I didn't really do anything super crazy in high school, or if I did, I don't remember it. And so I don't.
You were really preoccupied with music, though.
Yeah, well, that was something that I don't think I would have been able to do. I probably wouldn't have been into music as much as I was if I didn't have the situation I did, where I could kind of tailor my experience in high school.
Yeah,
and then I could spend all my extra time doing music things. So yeah, I was pretty preoccupied. But even in the events that I went to, like dances and football games, like like so much shady shit happens at football games.
Yes,
behind bleachers, and whenever parents aren't watching, or what, most of the time parents aren't even there, they're just dropping their kids off. And
maybe not these days. I don't know how it goes these days.
Kids are always finding something.
Just like parents just dropping kids off and stuff.
Oh, I bet so. Yeah,
I guess if it's high school, that makes sense.
Yeah, high school.
And but you just drive. But in middle school, like I would get dropped off and then picked up like 3 hours later, and they had no idea what I was doing that whole time.
No, yeah. But lucky for my parents, I really wasn't doing anything that crazy. We just walked around all the time, and I listened to all of the other kids and all the bad things they were doing.
I really enjoyed school when I was in grade school. I have this distinct memory of there being a sandbox on my playground, and at recess, no kids would play in the giant lone sandbox because there was nothing fun in it but sand. And I would sit there alone through recess and I would build these sand sculptures. And I was so happy doing that by myself. And also in elementary school, I would go to a lot of birthday parties because if one student in the class had a birthday party, well, everyone was invited. Those were the rules. And at lunchtime, you weren't lonely because you sat with your class. And it wasn't until I got into middle school and high school that I wasn't getting invited to those birthday parties anymore. And I didn't know I ended up sitting or spending most of my lunches in the library. And I don't think it was because I was disliked, but I didn't know how to bond with other people. And especially girls, they go through large emotional leaps at that stage. And at that point in my life, I too was going through emotional leaps, but I had no idea what to do with them. So I would hold them in, and I was very confused when I would see other girls go through them openly. And I didn't like it. I avoided it. It became very difficult, and it was also hard to focus on school when I got older.
Hello, my name's Jerry. I'm a 5 with a 6 wing, and I hated school from start to finish. Imagine being a 5 and being overweight and an introvert and bullied. It was torture. One of the best days of my life was when I graduated from high school. It's not that I didn't enjoy doing a lot of the schoolwork, loved math, but as far as being in the school environment, no fun.
Anyway, what are some of your bad stories?
Oh, man. Well, there was the time that I went to truancy court.
Okay.
Do you know what truancy is?
I'm trying to remember. It's familiar. It's distant in my mind.
Truancy is when you miss so much school that your parents have to go to court.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
So this is a fun story. This was my last semester of high school.
Oh man, almost made it.
Oh man. So the same thing happened to me when I went from middle school, middle school to the high school. I was back on periods, and then I went to I moved my junior year and went to another high school and was back on blocks, and everything was all jacked up. So I came in as a junior. I was taking senior English, and then my senior year I was taking sophomore English.
Okay.
And freshman science and freshman PE, which was terrible. Because they made you wear those short shorts. And so I'm in there as a senior with like hairy legs with a bunch of freshmen.
14 and 15-year-olds, yeah.
It was terrible. Oh.
How strange.
Yeah, it was very strange. But I went through, and the other part about it too was the high school I was at before was more advanced than the one that I ended up going to finish off. Mm-hmm. And so I had already completed the level of math that I needed to graduate so I took no math classes at this new high school. And because I was on the period schedule before, I had more credits than I would have at that stage of my junior year. And so it was just this weird situation where my last semester in high school, I only actually needed one class to graduate. And it was freshman physical science.
Okay.
And it was fourth block, so at the end of the day. And so I had worked it out. I worked out like this really sweet schedule, right? Mm-hmm. So this is my last semester, and it started off pretty well. Mm-hmm. But then I kind of didn't really I started kind of sleeping in a little bit through first block and stuff. Mm-hmm. And then second block, this is what happened. So this class started out as creative writing class, and it was fun. But within like a month, it started turning into college essay writing class.
Ooh, okay.
Which was my last semester anyway. Like Like, it's a terrible time to do that. You should have already had that.
Yeah.
Had that worked out.
Right.
But I didn't, but I should have. And I didn't want to do that, and it was really dumb. And she would give us these writing assignments that were like college essay writing assignments. And I'm like, this is not what I signed up for. This is, and it's supposed to be, like an AP level class. And the teacher was terrible. Like, as a person, I could not stand her. And so we got to, and so, I started missing class in there, and I started doing some real passive aggressive shit, because I got bored and I got destructive. And so she would give us assignments, and I would start out the assignment. I would do it really well, like I'm writing a kick-ass college paper. And then halfway through, no matter what it was, halfway through, all of a sudden there's this scene where ninjas come in and just start slicing up. And I'm like describing in great gore, like these terrible like fight scenes and just like gory horror stuff.
You're really testing to see if she was reading those essays.
Oh yeah. Well, I think she at least read them, like skimmed them, because she started flunking all my papers.
Oh.
And so we got to halfway through the semester, and so I started skipping that class some too.
Yeah.
And so we got halfway through the semester, and there's these teachers that do this that just drive me crazy. And she took her one of the desks out into the hallway, and had each of us come out one by one for her to tell us our grade for the semester.
Oh.
I don't know why. It's some sort of like power trip thing, I think.
Yeah.
And so it's finally my turn, and I go out, and she tells me that I'm going to fail this class. And essentially what she says is, because I'm going to fail this class, I'm going to fail at life.
Oh. Wow. Okay.
She basically told me I'm not going to be a success at life because I don't take things seriously, and I'm just like a waste of space. And
man, you showed her.
Oh, she hated me. She hated me even more after this. So what I did was, after the class was over, I walked down to the principal's office, and I convinced the principal to let me go and be a teacher's aide second block as well for my chorus teacher, where they would take my attendance. I would take the F. I'm like, I'm fine with that. Like the class rankings are already done. Like I don't need this class to graduate. I'm good.
Yeah.
I would take the F, but they still had to take my attendance. So then they would just take my attendance in second block as in the chorus class. And they agreed to it.
Wow. That's so crazy.
So so shortly after that was when, after our spring concert, there's really not a lot to do. Like we pretty much just goofed off in show choir.
Yeah.
So as you can imagine, if I'm just going to school to sleep on my chorus teacher's couch in his office, why even go to school?
Yeah.
So I started sleeping in, or I would go over to my friend Derek's house and we play video games and we goof off, and then our friend Brandon would join me and join us, and we skipped a lot of school. And
did they go to Truancy Court?
No, they didn't. They skipped. Derek at least skipped more school than me, but they had this thing called time for time, whereas I think you got like 5 days that you could be missing before it started like deducting from your grade. But if you went to school after, you can make up these like time for time sessions.
Yeah.
Which was complete like bullshit, because all you did was just sit there and you just had to be there. You had to be a warm body in a seat. It was basically like detention.
Yeah.
Making to make up for it. I had essentially like pretty much stopped going to my first 3 blocks, which made it really hard to go to 4th block, because I'm like going to school just for 1 block, right?
Yeah.
But I did need that class to graduate, and it was a complete blow-off class. This teacher is another teacher who was just like on a power trip, and he did the same damn thing, where he would go to the back of the class and do that thing where you can't go back and but the thing is, he was lazy ass, and so he didn't actually grade anything. Like, I hardly ever got grades back from him. And
what did you get?
Nothing. Got nothing back. So what he would do is he would call you up and he would ask you what you thought your grade was. And then based off that, he would tell you what your grade was.
Gotcha. Okay.
So at this point, I had missed 10 days in that class. But I went back and did 5 time for time sessions. So I was caught up.
Yeah.
I know that I aced all of my tests. Like I did the stuff I needed to do to get a, at minimum like a B.
Mm-hmm.
And he has me come back. And that's the other thing too, is like, he only taught freshmen and he thought he was the smartest like person. And he would say the dumbest shit to just try to, think he was pulling one over on them. And I would just sit there and roll my eyes.
Yeah.
And so he did not like me at all. And he went back there and he asked me what I thought my grade was. And I told him it was an A.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
Yeah.
Wow. How would you not say that?
Yeah. Very confidently. I'm like, oh, I have an A.
A+.
Yeah. And he said, no, you have an F. I'm like, no, I have an A. He's like, no, you have an F. You've missed, this many days. I was like, yeah, I went to time for time for all of those. And I've aced all of my tests and I've turned everything in. I have an A. He's like, no, you have an F. I was like, okay, show me.
Mm-hmm.
Show me all of my grades and how they add up to an F.
Yeah.
And he was just like, I'll get back to you. Never got back to me, but I got an A.
Yeah, how about that? Called his bluff.
Yeah, and so that was, so I got the class, right? So I stopped going to those other classes, like I mentioned. And by the way, I wasn't supposed to be able to be a teacher's aide in 2 blocks. Like that was against the rules, but somehow I managed to work that out. Apparently, the fact that I did that and went around that creative writing teacher's back, she was pissed. Mm-hmm. And she went to the assistant principal, who was a hard ass. Mm-hmm. And she also found out that I was not going to that class as well for attendance. And she convinced the assistant principal to turn me in for truancy. So picture this. I am a senior in high school. Mm-hmm. I have finished the semester.
Yeah.
We are done with the semester. I am 2 days away from graduation.
Yeah.
And the thing that got me was I'm 17 at this point because I'm a grade ahead.
Right.
So I'm still a minor. So my parents have to take time off work, like a whole day, to sit in this truancy court. And we're like next to the last case. And it is like the ratio of mullets to non-mullets in this was off the charts.
Yeah. And
it was very much I obviously was not, this situation is not what that's for.
Yeah.
Right? That truancy is truly for parents who are neglectful of like their small kids who are not making sure that they're getting up and getting ready and going to school or, whatever. That's what apparently that's for. I think it's all BS, but truancy shouldn't be a thing, but I digress. And so I get up and I talk to the judge and I tell her the situation and she's like, okay, so what was this class, the second block class that you missed and all this stuff? And I'm like, creative writing, like AP creative writing class or something. And she just looks at me like, this is insane. But one of the things that she did was she actually read out the number of days that I had missed in each block. Uh-huh. It was like 32 days in first block. And these are school days. So that's like 6 weeks of school.
Oh my God.
So 32 days in first block. And it was something like 18 in second and something equivalent in third. And that's what I got turned in for. But I told her, I'm like, I'm graduating in 2 days. Mm-hmm. And so, I left. One of the bailiffs knew me from, they were the uncle of one of the people that I was in show choir with. And they came up to me and they were like, I looked at your case and there's absolutely no reason that you should have been turned in for truancy. Someone had a grudge out.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it was.
I didn't really like elementary school much at all. I never felt like I fit in. There were cliques at the school that I went to, and I was definitely not in a clique. I was the only redhead. I wore glasses, had crooked teeth, and I just did not feel like I fit in. I was an average student. The best part of school was that I learned to read, and I love to read. I still do today. And I got involved in some sports like volleyball, but I never really excelled at sports or team play. I just, it was not a good experience. And high school wasn't much better. I enjoyed college, but as a child, school, I was much happier being at home.
So this is not the last time this would happen.
Okay.
So I was a huge music theory nerd in college. I was going to school for music, and I had this perception of college, once again, probably from movie and TV shows, right?
Yeah.
It was like I have to suffer through middle school and suffer through high school so that I can get to college.
Mm-hmm.
Because college is where they actually treat you like an adult. And if you don't want to go to class, you don't have to go to class. And if you just want to show up and take the tests and do that, you can just do that. Like, you are an adult, you're paying for it. Like, this is how it works. And you take the classes that you're interested in, and you don't take the classes that you're not interested in. Like, that's the view that I had of college. And that is absolutely not right at all, especially the school that I went to, which I called 13th grade.
Right.
I show up and I'm taking these gen ed classes because first 2 years, it's all, most of it is gen ed stuff.
Yeah, it's 13th and 14th grade.
And I'm taking the same classes and learning the same things that I learned in high school. And I was taking like honors and AP classes, especially at the school I went to in Marietta, and most of them were harder than the classes I was taking in college.
Yeah.
Like, this is such a waste of time. But I'm like, I can suffer through that because I'm learning stuff that I actually am really interested in and enjoy learning. So I was doing show choir. I was doing like some songwriting classes. I was doing like studio recording classes. But the thing that I loved the most was music theory. And I was in this, I don't know how this happened, but somehow I got into this accelerated music theory class, like right out of the gate, where they were combining music theory 1 and music theory 2 into one semester. And it was a 3-hour class with a 1-hour lab. So in total, it was four credit hours. And I think I was taking 12 credit hours that semester. So it was a third of my grade. As you can tell, I haven't done math in a long time. It was a third of my grade, overall GPA.
Yeah.
And so I loved the music theory part of it. And even though it was, 8 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and my professor, who was the head of the music department, he would get up and like your face and snap and be like, circle of fists, like F sharp, and you'd have to like go through the whole thing. And like, that was how he would start the class, because he was drilling it into our heads to where it was just like muscle memory.
Yeah.
And it was a huge pain in the ass, but it was like a good pain in the ass. Like, I loved it because I was actually learning this stuff. And, music theory, it's a lot like math in a lot of ways. And, but it's like an applied thing where I was taking what I was learning and I was creating music off the back end of it. And it was really cool.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it came with this lab. And the premise of the lab is that you're supposed to learn how to sight read, which I really wanted to learn how to do because I had a really good ear. And so I really relied on that ear. I never actually learned how to read music. Mm-hmm. And so I was looking forward to this lab because I needed to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
And the teacher of the lab, I still to this day, I just could not stand this person. And she was another person that had like this chip on her shoulder and was power tripping.
Right.
But she didn't do the lab right. And it drove me nuts because we were supposed to learn how to sight read, but before we would sight read it, she would play it.
Oh.
And I'm like, you can't do that because now I hear it. And I'm not learning how to sight read because I just like,
cheating.
I just come back because I could hear something once and usually like play it back.
Yeah.
If it wasn't like super complicated. Mm-hmm. And so I wasn't learning how to sight read. And so I got about halfway through the semester and I just stopped going to lab. So I'm like, this is bullshit. It's a waste of time.
Yeah.
And I was acing all of my music theory tests. And I got the second highest grade in the class on the final. It was a crazy final. It was 13 pages front and back. I came in a half hour early, left an hour late, and still didn't finish it. Nobody finished it.
Wow.
It was graded on a curve. The only person who got higher than me was a professional guitar teacher.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so, he knew this stuff. He might have actually finished it. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it was a really hard test. And and I did really well on it, and I ended up getting I think I got a low A in the class because I'd aced all my stuff. I got high A's on all like the music theory part of it, and then the lab, I'd gone to enough lab where it was either like a high A or a low B. Like it was in that realm.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry. It was either like a low A or a high B, right? It was in that realm. And so the next semester, because this was a combined music theory 1 and 2, I show up in music theory 3. And I show up in music theory 3 lab. And I walk in, and it's the same teacher. And she looks at me with like half bewilderment and half fury. And she says, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I'm in this class. I'm in music theory 3. And she's like, "There's no way you could be in music theory 3 because you failed music theory 1. No, I didn't. I got an A. Like, what are you talking about? She's like, "No, you stopped coming to lab." I'm like, "I don't know what to tell you. I got an A." And this conversation was in front of the whole class.
Oh, cool.
And so people started talking about it. And then I started bragging about it. And what we realized was that you could not go to lab or maybe go to part of lab, but you didn't really have to go. Like your grade wasn't dependent on it. Yeah. So if you were okay with like a B, you could get away with, not really going to lab. So I inadvertently influenced pretty much the entire male population of the music department to stop going to her labs.
Why just the males?
I mean, that wasn't intentional. It's just like, I guess they didn't care. And so they...
Classic stereotype.
Classic stereotype.
That's okay. That's really funny. But you didn't actually convince them? They just saw this story?
No, I wasn't trying to convince them. I was just bragging about the fact that I, got an A in music theory, but I only went to lab like half the semester.
Yeah. And then that word spread very quickly through all of everybody's friends. And yeah, okay.
Yes, that is what happened. So needless to say, she was pissed. She goes to the grade change committee and petitions them to change my grade from an A to an F.
Wow. Okay.
Now, in the history of the grade change committee, this had never been done. No one had gone to the grade change committee to bring a grade down. The grade change committee is for students to come and, petition to bring their grade up because they feel like they were unfairly graded.
Yeah.
So I don't know what went on in this room, but I did have an advocate. So Mr. Story, who he and I got along really well. I did I worked for him at his church outside of school. And so we ended up, he had my back.
Yeah.
And the only reason why I was aware of any of this was happening was because he told me about it. Like this was all happening. If he hadn't told me, I would have never known what was happening.
Yeah.
But what he said was, this is what she's doing, and we're going to have a hearing on it, and I'm going to go to bat for you, but I don't know what's going to happen. So he goes to bat for me and convinces them to compromise and bring my grade down from an A to a C instead of an A to an F.
Okay.
By the way, there was nothing that said that lab was required in order to get a passing grade. But I digress.
Yeah.
So my grade drops from an A to a C, but it's a 4-hour credit, which is a third of my GPA because I only had one semester of school under my belt. Yeah. So that dropped my GPA just below what I needed for scholarship. So I lost my scholarship because of that.
Oh, wow.
And so we're like halfway through the second semester. And when that happened, I'm like, fuck this shit. And I just dropped all my classes. I think I kept like 1 or 2 of the music classes, but I'm like, I'm out. I was done. And I decided to try to go back one more semester. So I start my 3rd semester of school, and I've lost my scholarship, and my GPA is quickly tanking. But I'm like, I'm going to try this again. And I had another English class, and it was another one of these teachers who thought they were the shit. And he gets up, and like the class itself wasn't that bad, but he's just always talking about like what a tough grader he is. And he continually says, you better work your ass off on this first paper because nobody ever gets an A on the first paper. And I'm like, I'm in college now. He seems serious. Maybe I should actually give some effort on this, right? So I did something I'd never done previously because I could always pull like papers out of my ass and like last minute tests and all of that stuff. The whole time I was at that that school outside Nashville where I moved my junior year, I cumulatively maybe did 10 hours of work outside of school. And most of that was for like a big research paper. Like, because I picked stuff up quickly, and I was good. I was good at tests, and I was good at writing papers because it's not that hard when you figure out like what the pattern is and what the puzzle is, and like you can figure out based off of the things that teachers say. You could put pieces together and know what they want to hear. And so I wasn't actually really learning a lot. I was just regurgitating stuff because I was smart at figuring out what the teacher wanted to hear. Yeah. And so it was just that was the art to it. So I'm like, maybe I should actually try on this one. Let's see what would happen. So I did something I'd never done before, which was I went through the actual writing process that they teach you. I did an outline. Yeah. And I did index cards, and I wrote a rough draft, and then I wrote a first draft. And then I did something I definitely had never done. I took the first draft to the writing lab at the school because I'm like, I want to make sure that, I'm not missing anything here. Yeah. And they read it, and they were like, have you ever actually considered being a professional writer as a career? No, but thanks. And so I'm like, okay, I should be able to do pretty well. I'm probably not going to get an A, but I should be able to get one of the highest grades in the class because I think this is a pretty good paper. Yeah. And I actually put effort into it. So I turned it in, and we got it back, and I got a 98. Or something like ridiculously high like that. It was like a minimum of 95. Like it was a high A. Yeah. And so I did what any sane person would do. I walked out of that class. I walked over to my advisor, and I dropped all of my classes.
What? Why?
Because I realized what a waste of time it was. Okay. I looked at the future of myself in that class and realized I was going to have to sit there for an entire semester and not really learn much. Yeah. And it was a complete waste of my time. I have better things to do. I didn't really have better things to do at that time, but I told myself that I had better things to do. Sure. Like what I was really doing was watching the OC and anime and, and stuff like that. And using my pirated copy of Photoshop to create, graphic art stuff. And right.
I did not enjoy school growing up as a 5. I felt like it was too restricting, and the topics I wanted to learn about weren't usually the topics that they teach in school. I saw myself as not smart enough or not capable enough because I couldn't follow their format. And it was really hard to see myself as an Enneagram 5 because I always thought I wasn't smart enough. But in reality, I've been trying to be capable my entire life. I do have a lot of knowledge about topics, but they're not usually the ones set in school.
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm a 5 wing 6. My education was always in the public school system, and while I did enjoy it okay, as I've gotten older, I realized I would have been the perfect candidate for homeschooling or small private school, but that was not an option for me growing up. I was an A student, and my struggle in school was not with academics, but in the social environment of the public school system. I remember on a couple of my report cards, the teacher's note that said Kate needs to raise her hand and ask questions when she doesn't understand, and that was frightening to me to raise my hand and ask because it implied to me that I was the only one who didn't know the answer, and I never wanted to stand out but blend in. I studied hard, and I would do that in my room in the evenings by myself alone, reading books and studying. And all in all, my memories of public school were good, but I wish I could have had a do-over in a homeschooled environment. I think I would have thrived much better.
So I didn't plan on going back. And I think we talked about this. When I decided to become a youth, I took a semester off, quote unquote. I was not going to go back. And then when I decided to become a youth pastor, I actually had a goal, a reason for going to school because I didn't really have that before. Yeah. And so I went through and I brought my GPA up in a year and a half. I brought my GPA up from a 1.8 to a 3.5 and then went and finished my degree at a different school. The common theme throughout that is there are a few of them, right?
Oh, there's one specific one now. And it's pretty classic, honestly, because I'm the same way. If I feel like there's somebody who's in charge and has this like arbitrary authority given to them, and they have a power trip about it, like they're obsessed with it, then I automatically lose all respect for them as human beings. And I'm like, you can jump off a cliff. Like, I don't give a shit about you. Like, I just want you out of my face. And so I'm the same way. I buck that authority really badly, which we've talked about in previous episodes, like especially in the religion episode. I did that in churches all the time because all churches is arbitrary authority just given to whoever for no reason. And so there's no earning it. There's no like you actually, sometimes you know more, but only about some things. So it's the same thing. I did the same thing in church as you did in college and high school. That was my version of like bucking authority.
Yep. And the reason why this is such a hot button issue for me in school especially is because what I've come to realize is that our education system is fundamentally not designed to teach you how to learn. It's designed to teach you how to obey.
Yeah.
You're going to sit in this seat. You're going to listen to me talk at you. Mm-hmm. You're going to take what I say as gospel. And then you're going to prove to me that you were listening to what I said. And, and then I'm going to grade you on that, on how well you were listening to what I said. And it's just, it grinds against every fiber of my being as someone who is curious about the world and wants to explore things and wants to truly learn. Like, truly learn and explore and see where things take me.
Yeah.
And I can't do that if I'm sitting in a seat in a rigid schedule. And, and there's some people who they excel at that. Like, their personality type fits that, and they want to have this structured process where they go through and they check all the boxes, and that's great for them. That is not for me. And I'd say it's not for people who like really want to learn and really want to make an impact on things, because that's not how you do it. That's not how you learn how to develop the skills and the things where you can actually go out and make an impact on the world. All you're doing there is just learning how to be a cog in a machine.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I didn't have to be there for that, but I agree with you. Because even as kids, I mean, you're basically just being trained on discipline, like how to be a good kid.
Yep.
Based on a bunch of other people, which I can see why parents have so many problems with public school, because it sucks. And why would you want so many people influencing your kid on how they're being raised, essentially 8 hours a day, and turning into who knows what they're going to be, and putting them under arbitrary pressures and stuff that doesn't matter. Yeah, no, I think school sucks.
But what drives me crazy is it doesn't have to be this way.
It doesn't, yeah.
And there are some schools that I feel like are more on the cutting edge, who are actually basing and structuring things off of how we learn as human beings.
I feel like those schools are usually pretty expensive, though.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's a privilege there, whereas that should be the norm.
Right.
And I'll give you spoiler alert. There's a lot more free time and a lot more play time. Mm-hmm. And because the play is where we learn all of this, where we integrate all of the things that we're being taught.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, you don't really learn at that deep level.
Sure. And we can take that into adult life. Mm-hmm. We're like that now. If you're constantly covered up with whatever it is, if you work 2 or 3 jobs and you're constantly just trying to make ends meet and you're just trying to pay the bills, or you have a job and a family and you're doing all these things all at once all the time, there's no space for creativity. There's no space for fun. There's no space for play and being able to pursue hobbies or passions or whatever. And you're always just kind of pushing that to the back of your mind and not being able to explore those things. And eventually those things just dull down until there's not really there anymore. And you're just, like you said, a cog in the machine. You're just moving along. You're doing the motions. And that's definitely something I've fallen victim to a lot. And that's when you get bored. And as fives, we just get bored, and then we get destructive.
Yeah, and we get cynical and nihilistic. And I think part of the root of that is when we feel like we don't have the freedom to be curious anymore.
Yeah.
And to explore and experiment. And so it's built into the system. And that's why I've never really felt like I fit into the system, because it goes against the very nature of who I am as a 5.
Yeah.
I don't work in that. And I shouldn't have to work in that.
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe that's why we always feel that way.
Yeah.
I think that's something that brings us kind of all closer together as a community, is that's definitely something a lot of people have in common, is we always feel like we're kind of on the outside of whatever it is that's happening. And a lot of the times it's because we've already deemed it useless and to be a part of that thing. And then we just are cynical and judging the other people who are part of it also, you know? And that's definitely where I've been in my life a lot. So I think it's definitely a challenge. It's really hard to get to a place where you can find that flexibility and that freedom to be able to create space for the things that you love, and the space in your daily life to be able to explore and to be curious about things. And I feel like I do that more now than I've probably ever done, because pretty much anytime I'm sitting down doing nothing, I'm usually like on my phone researching something or looking up something or reading about something. And these days with my job, like, I'm just constantly trying to learn about wine. So like I'm driving around listening to Audible books about wine, and I'm reading about wine at home and doing all these things. So for me, I've kind of created a situation where my job kind of supports learning, and it's learning about things that I like and care about. So I kind of lucked out in that way, but it's not always been the case. And for the most part, it was not the case. In churches, it was, because I was wanting to learn about theology and I wanted to be smarter and superior to everybody, and which we've talked about. And I had plenty of time to do that. But you know, now I don't use any of that. So it was a decade of waste, but
I'm sure there were some soft skills in there that you learned.
Oh yeah. I think that I also was able to hone the craft of leading groups of people and bands and doing music and definitely kind of coming together in those ways. So there were benefits to it for sure, but I think it's just about trying to figure out where that space is in our lives and how we can do that. I would be interested to hear how other people have done that. If you're listening and you have successfully done it or not successfully done it, and you're like, I have no idea how to do this, I think that'd be something that we could definitely talk about in the community, because I would like to hear about those stories. I have no idea what the answer is.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at my journey of, I went through this career path, and then I stepped off the career path for a while. Mm-hmm. And it took that break of me going and starting my own business, and I made the rules at that point.
Yeah.
And that taught me a lot. And then now I've stepped back into a more standard career path, but with a completely different reference frame and a completely different set of skills. And I'm very fortunate in that I have, I'm in tech, and so I have one of those cushy tech jobs, and so there's a more flexibility there for me than it probably is for the average person. But that shouldn't be that way. Like, that's the thing that drives me crazy, is like, I recognize that's a privilege, and I don't feel bad about that. I feel angry that more people don't have access to that sort of thing. Like, our society is not structured in a way that gives people the room to breathe and to actually be introspective and to get to know themselves and to get to know like what it is that they're passionate about, and get to start like to follow that passion and be curious. Like, we kill curiosity on a daily basis. Yeah. And think about the impact that has long-term on our society. If we don't have people out there who are free to be curious, free to wonder, free to notice things that could be improved in the world and actually start to do something about it. You can't do that if your head's always down, you're in survival mode. And that's how most of us are all the time. And it pisses me off. Like, I get riled up about it.
I think there's been a huge kind of rude awakening to society, though, after 2020.
Yeah.
And the pandemic. I listened to a really great podcast episode about this, and about how they were kind of exploring, these journalists were getting together, and they talked about the first half was specifically talking about the service industry, because it's suffering so badly. And this first half was talking about, they talked to all the restaurant owners and all the bar owners, and they were like, where are you in this? What's going on? And they were just like, yeah, we're just really, we had to lay everybody off in March of 2020, and then we just haven't been able to get them back, and we just can't figure out why. Just people don't want to work, and I don't know why they don't want to work 80 hours a week for 40 hours and 40 hours being paid at $2.15 an hour. I don't know why they wouldn't want to do that. it's a job. Like, come on, and basically you just hear this whole line of people just saying the same thing and being like, all right. And one guy even said, I had to get a cook and I was so desperate to get a cook that I only had one guy show up to an interview and I had to give him what he was asking for, which was $20 an hour.
Oh, the horror.
Right. And he was so sad about it. Well, then it shifted. And then they started asking all of these career servers and bartenders and head chefs in New York and all these people who got laid off. And they were like, what was this experience like for you? And they were like, yeah, I got laid off. I was really worried about it. And then I signed up for the unemployment, and it was, and the unemployment's obviously been higher than it's been ever. And so they were like, yeah, I woke up and realized I could do anything I wanted with my day.
Yep.
And a lot of them were like, I remember so many people, it was like, I learned yoga and I learned how to like take care of myself, and I started exercising for the first time in 10 years. And I started like doing all these things. One of them was like, I learned Spanish, like,
yep.
All these things. And people were like, I started learning to paint again. And one guy was like, he was a head chef, and he was like, I had been doing 80 hours a week for so long, for more than a decade. And I had a family and I had all these things. And he was like, I just didn't even know what life was. And he was like, one day I woke up a couple weeks after I was laid off and I realized my back didn't hurt anymore. And my feet didn't hurt and my neck didn't hurt. And I didn't have chronic headaches anymore. And the bags under my eyes went away. And all of these things happened. And he was like, it was the first time in my adult life that I actually enjoyed life. And all these people said the same thing. And so everybody, they always ask the same question at the end. Do you think you'll go back to the service industry now that you can? And every single person was like, no, I'm definitely not going back. There's no way. I'll find another job. And even the head chef, he was like, I started learning how to love to cook again. And I started being experimental with cooking at home and cooking for my family and doing these things. And it was just a huge awakening that I want that to be the thing I love. I don't want it to be the thing that I have to make money to do and pay the bills. And so he was like, I'll do something I can just clock in and out of and work from home or something. And now all these people are wanting to work from home. And I'm all for forcing companies that if you don't have to be there to like sell a product or something that you have to be there for, work from home. Like, why not? Productivity goes up across the board always when people get to work from home and do it however they want. And so I'm really rooting for this huge shift in society where like, sticking it to the man. You don't get to do it the way you've always done it. You don't get to make people come to class and sit 8 hours a day and listen to you speak and do your rules and have to abide by all of your dumb, arbitrary shit. Like, it's stupid. We shouldn't have to do it. And all Enneagram Fives will be happier because of it.
Yeah, there's this... I didn't intend for this conversation to get political, but what the hell? There's this narrative that has been, I don't know how long it's been going on, well before I was born, either of us were born, that, if you're essentially, you want to keep a dog hungry, because that's when it'll really fight for things.
Yeah.
And there's very much a mentality of this in the elite class of, we should be desperate for things. We should be hungry for, like, that's what keeps us, that keeps us, in service, and but it also keeps us so preoccupied that we aren't aware of what's really going on around us.
Yeah.
And the power dynamics, and how much of our life we really have very little control over. And any time we start to get like a modicum of power back, they try to come down like full force on the working class. And but it's this narrative of, if we provided like a basic safety net for people, they would just be lazy and not want to do anything. And the thing that drives me crazy about that is you take away especially if you take away like the electronics age and all of that stuff. If you look at kids, when they don't have anything to do, they're not lazy. They start getting curious again.
Yeah.
And they find things to preoccupy, and they experiment and they learn about stuff. Like, they just, they create games and they do all this. Like, when I look at my kids, there are times when, like, especially during the pandemic, when my wife was pregnant, and it really was very much survival mode for us, and they watched a lot of TV. We were really good up until that point about keeping TV, like, screen time to a minimum. Like, we would watch, I think we would only watch like a couple of movies on the weekend, and like that was the extent of it. And it just started slowly creeping in. And it got to the point where they were not really interacting and playing, like creative play. because they were watching too much TV and they're just kind of preoccupied. And it was, there was so much dopamine coming into their brain that they weren't, all they wanted was to consume at that point.
Yep.
Which is a whole other piece of it. Like, that's really what what we're designed to do. Like, all of this is for the purpose of making us consumers. But that's a whole other conversation, right? So, but when we, after we had our baby and we were able to come up for air, and we started helping them disconnect from all of that, it did not take very long to where they're back at like coming up with games and taking little figurines and having conversations and pretending they're pirates and just like all kinds of stuff like that.
Yep.
And they're creating things, and that is who I firmly believe that's who we are at our core. When you strip out all of the things and around in our environment that are like sucking the life out of us and that are numbing our brains and zapping our creativity, if you were able to do that, and we're not inherently lazy, we're inherently creators.
Yeah.
And if we could wake up to that, then we could transform the world. And the start of that, the foundation is restructuring how we educate our children and teaching them that they're creators and giving them that space and letting them experiment and play. And that's how we start to change society and get out of this rat race that we're in.
Yeah, and it'll affect all of us. It'll affect us too. If we could do that for ourselves, it's the same concept.
Yeah.
We'll rediscover parts of ourselves that's been laid dormant a long time ago, for sure. And that's exactly the way the system wants it to be, because we can't, if we start thinking for ourselves, everything it will collapse for the elites.
Imagine the horror. People having independent thoughts.
Yeah, what if all the Amazon workers just didn't show up one day? But yeah,
well, actually, I really want my Amazon packages, so
just automate that. I'm okay with that. Anyway, well, this has been a good conversation. I think this is a good place to end it.
Yeah,
a lot of good things have been said in the last few minutes. So it seems like a good place to end it.
All right, I'm good with that.
All right,
don't go to school, kids.
Don't stay in school.
Hey, it's Josiah, and I wanted to say thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this episode and you're the type of person who likes helping others, would you do us a favor and share it with other people like you? If you found value in this conversation, they will too. I also want to give a special thanks to our community members who shared their voice with us in this episode. If anything in this conversation has resonated with you, or if you have any further thoughts or questions, I want to invite you to join our community of other people like you and continue the conversation at Enneagram5.com.